Hi again to this second talk of Beyond the Four Factors. Today with Mike Beuoy, Nathan Walker, and Andrew Patton. My name is Adrià Arbués-Sangüesa. I'm currently pursuing a PhD at Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. I'm in my last year of thesis, and I'm working with computer vision and deep learning techniques applied to sports, mainly basketball and soccer. And if you had been here before, you know that we recorded this first talk entitled Beyond the Four Factors with Justin Jacobs, Todd Whitehead, and Seth Parnell late in December 2020, where, we discussed several topics on sports analytics. I received really nice feedback from the community, basketball community overall, and that was encouraging enough to put together another set of amazing panelists for today and record another talk. So thanks for the feedback and thanks for watching. It was really appreciated. In the first talk, or in the first event, I made a deep intro. I won't go that deep today, but just to refresh a little bit, I want to go back to March 2020, where all the Twitter basketball Spanish community, we started creating content. We started creating the awareness for clubs and teams in order to make them realize that sports analytics are a thing and then they should invest at some point. So we gave talks, we share code, we share experiences, but still we have some parts missing because we don't have the experience that all of you guys that are presenting have. So I would say that now at this point, we are a little bit stuck, mainly because, okay, clubs now and teams like coaches and general managers, they might know what is usage rate. They might know what is defensive efficiency. They might know assist ratio or percentages. But they don't do much more research after the four factors. So they stick to the traditional things. And I think that at this point, no professional careers are offered here. But I'm not blaming the clubs. It's a huge investment if you want to do it properly. So these talks should be this bi-directional bridge between analysts and teams. And it should be like a win-win situation. For analysts, the ones that are trying to make their way into sports analytics, they can learn from the very best. So they can gain knowledge, see how experts work. And at the same time, teams can see cool stuff that can be done with numbers that could actually boost the performance of the team. So that's a little bit why am I recording these presentations. So before starting, I want to answer a question that I've been asked quite a lot after the first talk. That is, what path should I follow if I want to be a sports data scientist? There's not a unique solution. So, and every club, every person, it's a completely different scenario. And I think it's hard to define like a specific profile and a specific potential fit between the analysts and the coaching staff. So just to refresh a little bit, in the NBA or United States, I think this is the common evolution, so the complete pipeline. We all start with the coaching staff, and at some point, one of the coaches is in charge of crunching the numbers. So this is the assistant coach that starts doing this. Here in Spain, we have Luis Riera, we have David Garcia, Jose Angel Samaniego. So this is nothing new for us anymore. At some point, this coach gets separated into the figure of an analyst, that it's not calling timeouts, it's not drawing X and O's, but he's doing the numbers in an office, separate way, but in strict contact with the coaching staff. If the club gets bigger, this analyst becomes like an analytics department, okay, and things get a little bit more powerful. An alternative to this, that it's what we currently have here in Spain, is outsourcing a company. We have, for instance, Instat, that is providing data from play type situations or also on-off statistics to coaches, and this does not require a lot of post-processing. I think this picture changes when we have tracking data, and this outsourced company, that could be Stats Performance, Nathan will talk afterwards, provides tracking data, and this requires like a full-time guy working with this data. You have to filter it. So the outsourced company talks with the analytics department, and the analytics department is the one in charge of communicating with the coaching staff. And I guess that the trend nowadays, at least in the NBA, is having one of the coaches that is also like kind of a sports data scientist. We have the case of Dean Oliver in Washington Wizards, or we also have Sergio Oliva. It's a guy from here, close to Barcelona, Gelida, that he's in Utah Jazz. So I guess that there's not a unique answer of this path that we all seek, but what it's crystal clear is that we need to be versatile profiles, have a strong basketball and computer science background, although it might not be strictly related at first, but know how to combine these acquired skills, and then having these communication skills in order to talk to everyone. You might be talking to coaches, you might be talking to analysts, you might be talking to the outsource company. So I guess this is pretty required in these situations. Okay, so without further ado, now I will introduce the speakers for today. The first one is Mike Beuoy. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing properly the surname, but well, I'm sorry. Well, his Twitter account is InPredict. He has this physics-based background, and he has been working as an actuary for a very long time. And he has what he calls this hobby site that would be a part-time job for anyone else. That's called impredictable.com. I'm pretty sure you have checked this out first, but well, lately he's been working quite a lot with in the NBA live win probabilities, where you can see that you have this picture where you can see the probability of a team winning or losing a game for each timestamp of a game. And then you also have information about the MVP or LVP. And also, this is something that he will explain much better afterwards. He's doing research in unexplored fields such as shooting curves and shooting mechanics. And he opened a data set, which is super cool, and kudos to Mike for doing so, in order for everyone to do some experiments with this. In today's talk, Mike's presentation will be about keeping your eye on the ball, using tracking data to understand shot mechanics. And I think that's a super interesting topic. Then we have Nathan Walker, aka BV Stats. He's a data scientist at Stats Perform. That's one of the outsourced companies by the NBA that provide huge amount of tracking data. And you probably know him from Nylon Calculus and his articles. I would call that he's a Swiss knife of basketball analytics, as I will mention in a minute. And he has this cool pattern that only for €1 or €5, you have like top-notch content. I was talking about Swiss knife thing analogy because when you check his Twitter, like you can see that he touches everything. So every time there's a new metric or anything, he has like a complete report of what is working, what should be improved. So he really understands also. And among these topics, you find all-in-one metrics, team projections, draft projections, win probability, luck adjustments, or player shooting comparisons. So in today's talk, Nathan will do a shallow dive in clutch play in basketball. And finally, we have Andrew Patton, that he recently got his PhD in Johns Hopkins University in topics related to exposure science and environmental epidemiology. And he's actually publishing now papers, so kudos to Andrew. And it's pretty nice to have both Mike and Andrew here that despite not having like strictly basketball related background, they both made it to be like top contributors to the sports analytics field. You probably know Andrew from his apps, shiny apps, such as the one of Darko, Rad, Gravity, everything. You can check his Twitter. He has like a pinned tweet with all the links. So feel free to check these and spend one afternoon playing with those. And besides, he's also an open source contributor. You can check his GitHub repository, where he creates notebooks with Python and R coding languages to build, for instance, shot quality models, statistical plus-minus models. I think that's pretty necessary for the overall situation that we are living now. So in today's talk, Andrew's presentation is entitled The How and Why of Communication with Graphics. So this is the set of panelists for today. I'm pretty happy of how this ended, and I think there's no overlapping at all, and we can discuss afterwards. So we'll have every presentation will be around 20 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A for everyone. Before starting, I just want to mention that I'm also uploading some open source code on top of EuroLeague data. That it's something that was missing at the moment. I put together some Python notebooks and machine learning concepts. It's nothing complex, but you can learn how to do clustering of shooters, classification of player positions, or regression of data in order to predict the potential performance of a player. So as I said, it's pretty naive, but feel free to check this out in my GitHub. So that's all, and let's now enjoy the talks. Thanks for watching.
All right. So first off, Adrià, just really thank you for this opportunity and getting this panel together. Really excited to share some of the work that I've done on this topic, and so really looking forward to the other panelists as well. So what I'm going to focus on is some analysis I've done leveraging the tracking data that's publicly available for the NBA and using it to understand the details of shot mechanics, both for free throws and for three-pointers. And the overall question I'm trying to answer is, what can we learn from the tracking data about what leads to good shooting? And to be honest, I've approached this from a lot of different angles. I've gone pretty broad. I don't know how deep I've been able to go. And that's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to presenting today. I also want to plug the data I've been able to start sharing on my site as well. So I want to make some of this publicly available to the extent I can to let other people take a crack at this. Because like I said, approaches from a lot of different angles. Still, not sure if I've kind of hit on the holy grail of what really leads to good shooting, but I can share here what I've been able to figure out so far. And then once again, just want to point the broader analytics community to the data I've shared to see what other people can get out of this. So I'm going to start with just a video. This is a free throw that Steph Curry took a little earlier in the season against the Brooklyn Nets.
And Steve Nash telling us one of the reasons, just go with a defensive-minded guy. Brown in his first year.
Right, and so I will play that one more time.
And Steve Nash telling us one of the...
And try to follow the path of the ball as Steph brings it up. So it can be hard to follow real time. So I used some tracking software to mark the position of the ball for every single frame and slowed it down a bit. So you can watch it again. You can see the ball as it's brought up and then to the point of release. And so if we zoom in on that, you can see that the general path that the ball follows is kind of like a skinny S curve. And so I think it's helpful to kind of understand, from watching games live or on video, it can be hard to kind of discern this pattern real time, but this is typically what a shot motion looks like. And this will help you connect to the charts I'll be sharing later on in the presentation as we try to really understand the details of the motions players go through to get their shot up, both for free throws and for three-pointers. Now, I marked all these frames by hand. Obviously, nobody's got time to mark every single shot and every single frame by hand. There is some promising research, I think, in terms of how to use machine learning to take video and kind of do this automatically. But fortunately, we don't have to do that just yet. There is tracking data available. So since 2013, the NBA has been tracking player and ball movement in all arenas. It started out with a company called SportView, has since migrated to Second Spectrum. And from a period of about 2013 to 2016, that data was publicly available if you knew where to look. Unfortunately, the data has since gone behind lock and key since 2016, but the data, all the analysis I'll be sharing in this presentation, is all built off of that robust but increasingly stale data set. My hope is at some point the NBA will figure out how to share this data publicly in some way, much in the same way the NFL has done with their big data bowl. So sharing tracking data, which I think may be like lagged a year, but sharing it broadly and sponsoring some really interesting analytics community contests to see what the broader analytics community can do with this incredibly robust data set. So like I said, everything here is a bit stale, and you'll kind of see it in terms of the players I've chosen. But there is quite a lot of data to dig into if you know where to look. When it comes to the tracking data, I think most people, with a passing familiarity of the NBA probably knows kind of what's available in terms of the tracking data, and most of the research and analysis has focused more on the motion of the players and the ball in 2 dimensions. So you can get a lot of interesting stats in terms of play types, defense, gravity, a lot you can do with just those 2 dimensions. I think what may not be appreciated is that the ball itself is tracked in all 3 dimensions. And that's where my focus has been. By the time I kind of understood where this data was, I think a lot of people smarter than me and with a lot more basketball knowledge had kind of figured out a lot of cool things to do with the player motion. But I hadn't really seen much done with looking at the ball in all 3 dimensions and what you can learn about player shot mechanics. So that's where I've spent most of my time when it comes to the tracking data, and that's what I want to share here in this presentation. So first thing to call out, the data is messy, but there is a lot of it. So the chart here on the right is 8 randomly selected Steph Curry free throw windups. So this is the path the ball traces according to the tracking data a second before Steph releases the ball. And you'll see you can kind of discern the typical S-shaped pattern for each of these shots, but there's a lot of weird kinks in the data. It looks pretty messy, and it's the tracking software, the tracking cameras are not super precise. So for one thing, this means that you can't really just take one shot and kind of view that as gospel, view that as truth when it comes to the true motion of a ball. In addition, the quality of the data, at least based on what I've been able to analyze, has varied from arena to arena. For example, the data since this is back in 2016, all the data from Oracle Arena, where the Warriors play, I had to throw out. It was just far too messy to really do anything with. And so the example I show here is for free throws. And like I said, you can discern like the typical pattern here and with some noise. It gets even more challenging when it comes to field goal attempts. One, they're not taken from the same spot every time. And probably most importantly, the time to release is a lot quicker. Obviously, players have a lot more time to get their free throw shot off. They don't have to worry about a defender closing out on them. They don't have that luxury when taking shots from the floor. And so you just have fewer data points because the release time for a three-pointer typically is about 0.4 seconds. So you just get a handful of noisy data points per shot when it comes to three-pointers. But that doesn't mean that you can't analyze this data and discern meaningful patterns from it. And so the approach I took, and it's to be honest, it's not very sophisticated. It's using pretty traditional techniques. Is taking the raw tracking data. You got to figure out how to clean it a bit, and then just applying some simple local regression techniques, sometimes known as LOESS. Plenty of R packages out there to help you with that, as well as I think even within base R. And so all you're doing there is taking a local regression, figuring out how much or how little to smooth, and then from that raw messy data, applying the local regression models, you can arrive at what should be a typical player shooting form. And this is what it looks like. So you can see Steph Curry, the by hand shot motion I had shared earlier in the presentation on the left. And then on the right is what I can get from trying to derive Steph's shooting motion from all the free throws he took essentially from 2013 to 2016, as long as the data was clean enough. In addition, I can do this for every single player. And so in addition to the motion of Steph's free throw shot, you can also see a typical 6'3" player, what their shot looks like. And just maybe an additional call, you can see this odd little kink in Steph's shooting motion. Steph, like a lot of players, goes straight from their dribble into their wind-up shot when it comes to free throws. And so what you're seeing there is the ball coming up on his second dribble before going into the shot. So this is how you can get from really messy tracking data to a pretty clean animation and understanding of the motion a player takes when they go through their free throw windup. In addition, though, the data doesn't hold your hand. So another challenge you're going to have working with data like this is the tracking data tells you where the player is. It tells you where the ball is. It doesn't tell you things like, is the ball in the player's hand? Who has possession of the ball? So from that, you've got to apply some freshman level physics to figure out when the point of release is. And so the methodology I came up with is looking at the full path of the ball. So starting from the beginning of the windup all the way to where the ball eventually gets to the hoop. And for this particular example, this is a James Harden free throw from 2015, I believe. And then you look at the path and you try to figure out, all right, when does it start looking like a standard Newtonian parabola? And it's never going to be exact. And I think that's something to always keep in mind with this analysis. There's uncertainty, ambiguity, and just general noise in the data. So nothing here is going to be exact. But for this particular free throw shot, the methodology I came up with arrived at a release point of 7.5 feet And beyond that, the ball typically looked like it was in free fall on its way towards the hoop. So this is where my physics background definitely came in handy to really make better sense of the rod tracking data and really discern what's a windup. And I think most importantly, understanding what those release points are for a shooter when it comes to angle, velocity, things like that. All right, so what can we do with this data? So one thing I've definitely been able to do is come up with a lot of new metrics when it comes to players shooting that we've never really had before. So as I've shared, you can look at wind-up motion. You can look at the release angle of a player, and I'll go into that in a lot more detail. You can look at a typical release height. So like, when does the ball leave the player's hand for a free throw? When does it leave their hand for a three-pointer? When does it leave their hand for a defended three-pointer versus an open three-pointer? This is all things you can derive from the data. You can look at release velocity, like how fast the ball gets out of the player's hand. Consistency is another topic I'll cover as well. It's really important when it comes to shooting, and so that's another thing you can measure, is how consistently a player's wind-up motion is. How consistent do they get the same release point, release angle, release velocity? And then the speed of release is something I want to cover as well in this presentation. So how quickly can a player go from the beginning of their wind-up to getting the ball out of their hand? When you've got defenders closing out on you, obviously that's going to be really important. The quicker you can get your shot off, the more successful you're going to be. All right, so next section, I want to focus on release angle. So this is examining essentially the ballistics of a basketball shot. Every shooter, whether they know it or not, faces a trade-off. And that trade-off is how high of an arc you want to shoot with. So a high arc shot has an advantage in that the hoop appears bigger on approach, literally looks bigger. It's going to approach it more directly, so you just have more effective hoop area, so to speak, for the ball to go through or even get a favorable bounce off the rim. The drawback is that a higher arc shot requires a higher release velocity, and presumably the higher the release velocity, the harder that is to control, the harder it is to be consistent from shot to shot. And one of the more notable examples, and if you just watch the games, I think you can tell this just using the eye test, Steph Curry has a very high arc to his shot. Or you can choose a lower arc when it comes to calibrating your shot. The advantage there is that typically it requires a lower release velocity, so presumably easier to control. The downside is that the hoop literally appears smaller as the ball approaches the hoop. And one of the more noticeable examples, once again, you can tell via the eye test, Tim Duncan has a very line drive-like shot, both for free throws and for field goals. So I've tried to illustrate this trade-off in various ways. So this is one chart I've put together to try to kind of put all those trade-offs onto a single chart. So on the vertical axis, we've got launch velocity, and on the horizontal axis, we have launch angle. And so when it comes to launch angle, your effective hoop area continuously increases. So the higher you can get that launch angle, the bigger the hoop will appear, and presumably, the greater probability the ball will go through the hoop or get one of those favorable bounces. The launch velocity has got an interesting pattern, and this is where knowing some physics helps as well. In this area, you can see actually launch velocity decreases as your launch angle increases. And so this is essentially free money when it comes to picking a particular shot motion. You can increase your launch angles, which means you're increasing your hoop area. You can also decrease your launch velocity, so you can get an easier, more controllable shot. Where it gets interesting and where the trade-offs occur is once you get beyond this minimum point of about 50 degrees. This chart in particular is calibrated for a player that's 6'3" tall. But once you get beyond about a 50-degree launch angle, that's where the trade-off comes in. So you can keep angling up your launch angle. That's going to get you better effective hoop area. That's going to require a greater and greater launch velocity. And so what I wanted to look at is, how do players either consciously or most likely subconsciously make this calibration? Where do they find the optimal trade-off when it comes to calibrating their shot? is another illustration of that trade-off. Call this a shooting's efficient frontier. For people familiar with investment portfolio theory, there's a similar type of illustration when it comes to variance and return trade-offs. This is the trade-off between launch velocity and effective hoop area. And this line right here, this parabola, is the physics of a basketball shot essentially forces you to pick a spot along this curve. And so as I called out earlier, so basically you can minimize your launch velocity by picking basically a 50-degree launch angle, and that's if you're a 6'3" player. In general, you don't want to be on the bottom half of this curve because, as I pointed out before, you can get the same launch velocity and a much better effective hoop area by choosing a higher launch angle. So for example, it makes no sense to shoot with a 45-degree launch angle. You can choose 55 degrees, get about the same launch velocity and a much higher hoop area. So this is where each shooter kind of picks their point along this curve to calibrate their shot. And here is where I found players actually end up. So I called out Steph is an anomaly. He's got a high arc, so he's further along the efficient frontier curve and has chosen to opt for a higher launch velocity because it does get him a higher effective hoop area. What I have found, though, is that players do not look to minimize their launch velocity. Like I said, you can minimize your launch velocity by going with a 50-degree angle shot. But what I found, and this is not just for 6'3" players, but kind of across all heights, is that players are kind of willing to angle their shot up a bit more to get a higher effective hoop area. And I think this chart kind of illustrates why they do that. Because as you can see, the trade-off is not that punishing. So going from 50 to say 52, 53 degrees, I only have to increase my launch velocity by a few tenths of a point, but I get another 5 to 10% in effective hoop area as a result. It's once you kind of go beyond this area that the 52, 53 degree range, that the trade-off gets a bit more punishing. So you've really got to amp up your launch velocity to get equivalent returns when it comes to effective hoop area. And so if you're a particularly skilled shooter like Steph and have that type of control, you can do that. But most players do kind of stop early on in the trade-off. And so, choose a somewhat higher angle, but not a, 5, 6 degrees above typically. As I mentioned, this is not just a pattern you see in 6'3" players. So I looked at players of all heights, and in general, they always choose a higher shot angle than what would be required for minimum release velocity, to the tune of about 2 to 3 degrees. So I think, as I said, the chart below illustrates why that is. You can get that increase in effective hoop area with not a huge trade-off. It's once you go beyond 2 to 3 degrees where it gets a lot more punishing to really create that effective hoop area with a high arcing shot. All right, so what does that mean? So are high arc shooters more accurate? And so I've done this more broadly, but I just want to focus on a couple examples. So obviously the first example that comes to mind is Steph Curry. He's got a launch angle of 56.5 degrees. A typical player his height launches about 4 degrees shorter than that. Steph obviously is a very successful shooter all around and successful from the free throw stripe as well at 91%. But we do have a counterexample, Miles Plumlee. He has a launch angle of 55.8 degrees. That's a good 5 degrees higher than a typical player his height at 6'11". Not a successful free throw shooter at 54%. So maybe it's low arc shooters that are more accurate. And on that, we do have an example there. So James Harden is a low arc shooter. His launch angle is at 49.9 degrees. A typical player his height shoots at about 52.5 degrees, and obviously above average shooter at 86%. But thanks to the NBA's inexhaustible supply of Plumlees, we have a counterexample here too. Mason Plumlee, Miles' brother, shoots with a much lower than average shot launch angle at 46 degrees. That's about 5 degrees less than a typical player and a good 10 degrees less than his brother. So from a mechanics standpoint, Mason and Miles have very different shooting approaches, but their percentages are very similar at 54 and 58%. So, and these are, just 4 examples, but it's typical of what I've found looking more broadly. And this chart kind of tries to lay it all on one page. So we have release angle on the vertical axis and height on the horizontal axis. And what I've done, each dot here is a player, and on the green dots are the top 20 shooters in free throw percentage, and the purple dots are the bottom 20. And if you just scan the graph, you can see there's just no clear correlation to players being above or below the average release angle when it comes to being successful. So you see plenty of purple dots above the line. You see plenty of purple dots below the line. You see plenty of green dots above the line like Steph Curry. You see plenty of green dots below the line like James Harden and Kyle Korver. And you also see players like Andre Drummond with a very high shot angle, and well, he's made some improvements lately. Historically, not a good free throw shooter either. So what is the key to good shooting? So it doesn't seem like launch angle is the holy grail, so to speak, when it comes to being a good shooter. So the only thing I've found, and this is why I'm hoping by sharing some data more broadly, we can get some more insights out of this, but the one thing I've found is consistency matters. So what I've looked here is at release angle and how consistent that release angle is from shot to shot. So this is effectively the standard deviation of a player's release angle, and then how that correlates to their free throw percentage. It's not, a super tight correlation, but it's, definitely a discernible pattern that the less consistent you are in your release angle, the worse you're going to be at free throw shooting. And so you can see players like Steven Adams on the low end and a highly inconsistent release angle. What's interesting though is you see Andre Drummond. He's actually kind of middle of the road when it comes to release angle. He's not particularly poor at getting the same release angle on the shot, but not a successful free throw shooter. So consistency and release angle matters. What I've also found is consistency in picking a spot is also really important. So from the tracking data, you can also measure where the ball is when the player releases their free throw shot. And I think most shooting coaches will tell you it's really important to pick a consistent spot from which to spot up and take your free throws. And so we can measure how well players do that. And this is where Andre Drummond kind of really sticks out. It'll be interesting to see if he's made progress more recently with his improvement in free throw shooting, but historically he's been very poor at picking the same horizontal spot along the line compared to his peers. And as you can see, the same with release angle. What you see with picking a spot is that consistency is clearly correlated with free throw success. So from there, so that's, like I said, that's what I've been able to discern when it comes to free throw shooting and what leads to success. Now I wanted to cover what I've looked into on three-point shooting. So just a reminder, and just because I like these charts a lot, so this is animated free throw windups for 8 players, including Steph Curry. And in general, you can see that it's a fairly windy pattern, so it takes kind of a meandering route from the beginning of the windup to the release point. You can contrast that with what a three-pointer looks like. So this is the animated three-point windups for those same 8 players. And in general, the path is a bit straighter. And part of this may just be due to the fact that it's a longer shot, but I think more likely it's due to the fact that you got to get your shot off quickly before your defender closes out. So you have less freedom to take maybe a more comfortable route to getting your shot off. And you can see that if you show both on the same slide here. In general, players' three-point windups are a lot straighter than their free throw windups. And one thing I want to focus on, this is what I'll focus on for the next few slides, is looking at Steph's windup motion. And in particular, look at the red dot there, which represents the ball. You'll see his disappears a lot quicker than his peers here. I think Steph is known for having very quick release on his three-point shot, and the tracking data validates that. And so what I've tried to do is figure out like what really drives that. Like, how does Steph get a quick release? And just eyeballing it, I think one thing you can notice is that his shooting form is a lot more compact than his peers. So it's a lot straighter and it's a lot shorter. And so that's what I wanted to dive into, is just understand more about that path and how Steph can create that. Back a slide. So this one is, I've never found an easy way to really explain this slide. And it's never intuitive, so it always takes some folks a while to get it. But this is the exact same motion I was sharing in the previous slides, but instead of looking at the profile view of a player's shot, imagine you're sitting in the rafters with a camera and looking straight down at the player. This is the path the ball would trace from that point of view. So in addition to the back and forth movement we saw in the profile view, you're also going to see some left-right movement in the player's shot as well. But once again, this is also where Steph stands out. You can see his form is just a lot more compact than his peers. Maybe Kawhi and maybe Clay get similar compactness, so to speak. But I think this also just calls out another way in which Steph can create that quick release is by keeping his shooting form in a nice, efficient, straight up and down motion. So there's not a lot of wasted movement in Steph Curry's shot. And then this is just one more view. So try to include some pictures to give a better sense as to what we're looking at here. So once again, it's the exact same motion we were looking at before, but pretend you're facing the same direction as the player. You're like standing, at the top of the key or something behind them in the free throw line. This is the path the ball traces from that point of view. So you pretend you're behind Steph Curry here. And once again, Steph, I think, sticks out here as well in terms of just how straight the path is going from the bottom of his shot to the point of release. And so, like I said, from the tracking data, we can derive the average release time for a player's shot. And Steph stands out. It stands out amongst these 8 players. He stands out just in general. I think he's got the second quickest three-point release time of any player in the database that I have. And it's a good 1/10 of a second better than his peers here. And some of that's by necessity. Steph is shorter on average than a typical NBA player. So there's definitely a premium to getting his shot off quicker before his defender closes out. Whereas if you're Kevin Durant and 6'9", you have more freedom to get your shot off maybe in a little longer time just because you've got the height advantage. So one thing I've tried to do is just how to dive deeper into this. And this is where the data that I've shared on my site, I'm hoping people can go much deeper than I have. But one thing I've looked at is just looking at the velocity of the ball during a player's windup. And so this is a non-animated version of Steph Curry and Kevin Durant's three-point shooting motion. And what I've tried to focus on is the velocity of the ball as they go through their windup. And it's color-coded, and I've also marked when the point of release, the point of maximum velocity, the point of minimum velocity, and then the release velocity. And so if you look at Steph, you can see maximum velocity is reached about midway through the shooting motion. And this is pretty typical, and I think this also corresponds to when the player's in the middle of their jump at 17.5 feet per second. His minimum velocity drops to about 12.3 feet per second. So a drop of about 5 feet per second before it accelerates back up to 16.8 when he releases. Contrast that to KD. His maximum velocity, he reaches once again around the middle of his shot motion at 24.4 feet per second, but it drops all the way down to 7.9 feet per second before his release velocity. So Steph, either consciously or subconsciously has found a way to essentially avoid that slowdown in his shot motion, and sees a far lower drop off in his maximum point versus his minimum point in getting his shot off. And so I think that's a key to his quick release is, finding a way to train your body to get to that quick release and avoid the slowdown that other players see in their shot motion. So that's as far as I've been able to go in terms of really understanding the quick release. Like I said, I'm trying to share a lot of this data. So if you go to my website, unpredictable.com, the top post right there is where you can find all of the detailed data I've been able to share so far. So there's a detailed 3-point windup pass for 189 players. Also been able to split this for made shots, missed shots, open shots, and defended shots. Also create a lot of advanced metrics for player windups. So if we go back to like this chart right here, try to identify all the key points in a player's windup, like when they reach this point of maximum distance from the ball, when they've reached this point earlier in their shot motion, the velocities, the timings. So I try to put all that in kind of a master data file for folks to take a look at and see if they can discern patterns when it comes to shot mechanics and overall success. And I hope to add free throw data soon. Right now, the data I have there is for 3-point windups, but the data is available for free throws as well, so I hope to add that soon. But like I said, I've gone really broad in the analysis I've done when it comes to shot mechanics and tracking data, but struggled to really get kind of real meaningful basketball insights out of this. And so hopefully by sharing this with the broader analytics community and a lot of people smarter than me with a lot more basketball knowledge, we can do a lot more with this data. So, and that is what I wanted to share today. And once again, just thanks, Adrià, for this opportunity.
Thanks, Mike. It was a really interesting topic, and I think that it's a huge contribution that you opened the data set. So thanks for that as well. We have some minutes for Q&A. We'll try to make it shorter than last time, but no worries. I have a couple of questions first. So the first one is, in the data set of 3-point shots, I think that another variable that comes into place, it's the pass before the shot. In case that we have a spotted shot, for instance. So at some point, do you think it would be possible to classify somehow a proper shot, like with a proper reception that I receive like more or less in my chest, and then I pull it up? Do you think we can filter that somehow with the ball tracking data?
I think definitely. I mean, the data is there to do it. I think I recall trying to do it, and kind of my our skills kind of failed me. So maybe I can take another stab at it, but maybe it's something I can share more publicly as well. To your point, and let other people take a crack at it. So I agree. I think maybe another interesting front to open up is how the player receives the ball and how that affects their shooting mechanics.
Yeah. Thanks.
At the very least, like whether or not there was a pass received beforehand or a dribble, inform like even how you split the data sets.
Yeah, that may be easier to filter out. Yeah.
Yep. And then I have another one that is just out of curiosity. That is, when you're talking about consistency in free throws in one season, like when you have all data inside one simple data set, did you try to filter out by season? I mean, for instance, a player that is working out all summer and his shooting mechanics or her shooting mechanics change. Do you have like this consistency? I think it would be interesting to see how is that player developing through time. Like if he's or she's getting to the spot that he's or she's feeling comfortable shooting with the new shooting mechanics. How are you filtering temporal consistency somehow?
I did take a look at that for a couple players, and I think there's a tool. If you go to my under the shot tracking menu, I think there's a tool where you can dive into that. I think for free throws, maybe not for 3-pointers. I did find Andre Drummond, so I'd call it out. He was like really bad at kind of picking a consistent spot on the line. He actually got much better at that. I think he had a shooting coach working with him on it. So like 2013, he was just literally all over the place. And then you can see him kind of getting more consistent, more tight in terms of his release point. So that was one example that came up. The unfortunate thing was like it didn't really result in any improvement in his free throw shooting. So it wasn't. I'm sure that was one piece he had to fix, but it wasn't the only thing he had to fix. The only other one that comes to mind, Dion Waiters, I think one season decided to shoot from like the opposite end that a typical player would shoot from. So if you like look at his kind of release point from, I think, the 13 and 14 seasons, it shifted about like a good 6-7 feet to the right for one season. And I remember trying to find out why he did that, and I think he just felt like it felt more comfortable to him. So that was one example that came up. I can't recall if he actually shot better, but it was a decision I think he just made on his own.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, that's all. Yeah, maybe if you want to ask. The last thing is that I think it's super interesting to see the correlation between wingspan and short release time of shooting. I think that's pretty cool. And you put it together like at the end of the presentation. Like it was really nice to see it. I don't know if Nathan and Andrew want to ask something.
I have a quick question. I'm sure Nate does too, but I have one. When you control for the height of players, does a shorter or more concise shooting motion lead to better efficiency, or is that TBD?
I think that would be TBD. So, but I think that's possibly to the point about wingspan as well. Like, the motion is probably a function of just the player body type as well. But I haven't looked at that, but I think that'd be interesting to take a stab at.
Because I remember that, like, in my limited basketball coaching, being coached experience, and also other sports, the idea that there's is it less important that you have the ideal form than a form that is repeatable every time? Mm-hmm. And so, David Thorpe always talks about like Kevin Martin's funky shooting form, but he could do it literally the same thing every time, or Sean Marion. So are the good shooters ones that do whatever they want, just the same thing every time, or do they have a few indicators that are technique driven, no matter the other little weird stuff around the edges? That was just the first thing I thought of. Obviously, that's a huge amount of work to figure out, but that was the first thing that jumped to mind. No,
I think definitely it's more important to be consistent and find out what works for you consistently, as opposed to like mimicking, a certain player's shot. I do think, I wonder if there is an opportunity, like maybe early on when people are learning how to, calibrate their shot, just to be more like Steph in terms of getting that quick release. I think it may be underappreciated, like how much of his success is driven by that, like how he can just go from wind up to release a lot quicker than his peers. And is there a way to kind of train yourself from that standpoint, while still kind of, keeping whatever idiosyncrasies, are easier for you to repeat shot after shot?
I had a couple questions basically in the same vein as Andrew's. But yeah, just thinking broadly, right? Like you have all these metrics that you've basically created that kind of represent a player's general shooting ability. Some of them are, at the like aggregate season career level. Some of them are at the shot level. I don't know if you've thought about this, or maybe this is, again, just a part of your like master plan to get someone in the public space to do it. But if you haven't thought about it, someone watching this, maybe you should think about it. But yeah, just taking all of those data points as like features in a model, and then, it seems like a classic good example of regression or machine learning to predict shooting accuracy. Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
That's like basically like more of a shot level database, as opposed to, I think what I've shared mostly is it kind of aggregated at the player level. So you're thinking like more detailed and kind of
either or, actually, yeah. So I mean, at the aggregate level, obviously you get more stuff like consistency. So that you could still train a model on aggregate data. Obviously, you have a lot more. There's trade-offs. You get less features, but more data points if you were to do at the shot level.
Yeah, I just thought of something like that you'd love. The idea of, on top of that, the idea if you have guys that like, oh, he'd be great if we could teach him how to shoot. Are there certain archetypes of that guy based on their mechanics you actually can fix, and guys you can't? Ooh, yeah, MKG, yeah. Cough.
Leave him out of this.
No, I think that's something I can, like, I'm always kind of, I want to be careful about like the data I share and like what is kind of really mine to share. But I agree, like a shot level database, you can do a lot with, I think, in terms of kind of really discerning patterns and kind of what's really driving player success or lack thereof.
Right. Yeah. My other real question was basically what Andrew's was, but I just didn't know I don't know what metric best measures player height in terms of their shot. Like, obviously height is the easy one, but I didn't know, like, is standing reach more valid? Is it less valid? I was just thinking of that as you were sharing, like, comparing by player height. I don't know if you thought of that.
Not exactly. I wondered if I can like derive true player height from this data, and like, is KD really 6'9"? Probably not. And does that show up in the data? But it probably gets complicated. Just each player has their own shot mechanics too. But I thought about that as their way to kind of derive player height from the data.
Gotcha. That's really cool.
Or like functional height, essentially, because if a guy is super tall with a super tall release, maybe their functional shooting height is 7'6" or whatever. But if you're a tall guy with a low release point, you're actually only 6'8" when your top of your head is 6'10" or whatever.
I think that data is in what I've shared. So if anybody's listening, take a look at that, definitely. Because yeah, I think you could. I think functional height would be like something you can derive from that data set.
Yeah, I almost wonder if like shoulder to rim, like the distance between your shoulder and the rim, is kind of what is driving a lot of this. Because obviously, all the other things like angle, but like your actual height. I mean, if you jump high enough, right? Like, let's say Isaiah Thomas jumps 3 feet in the air. Sorry, Isaiah Thomas, but like, that totally changes the like height thing for 3-pointers at least. I'm not sure if you talked about height with 3-pointers. I know you did with free throws, but
yeah, now I'm envisioning a scatter plot of just player height and then kind of release height.
Right.
You can see like who really jumps out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Literally.
Okay, so those were really solid points. I think we can move on to Nathan's presentation. So thanks, Mike, once again. It was really interesting.
All right. Well, thanks again, Adrià. Yeah, I'm glad to be kind of bookended by real data viz experts. So maybe this will not quite as good of a data viz as my two peers here, but yeah, I just really wanted to do a dive into clutch play, but kind of like Mike was saying, it's really a shallow dive into just many different aspects of clutch play. Not a whole lot of big outputs here, so maybe that's something that someone watching this could help do. But why talk about clutch play? Because confirmation bias is fun. Everyone loves to talk about clutch play in general. So-and-so is very clutch, and they'll maybe find stats that really talk up their player or talk down the player that they hate. And it's a small sample size, so it's pretty easy to do that. It's also a good excuse to talk up pvpstats.com, support Daryl. A lot of the data that I'm going to be sharing comes from his website. I'm pretty sure all of it comes from his website. He has different possession filters, and now he has like leverage filters that allow you to filter down to clutch play. And so those are a couple good reasons that we should talk about it. But why should we actually talk about it? I think in terms of basketball discussion, the things that are always really interesting to me are the things that a lot of people have opinions on, especially if they're strong opinions. And then, clutch is almost like doing physics in the quantum world, right? It's not only is it actually, small, like we have a very, very small sample size, and kind of extrapolating that to the larger world of basketball is very tricky. Even if you aggregate lots and lots of seasons of clutch play, you don't actually get a lot of data. Another reason that I'm interested in it, at least for this presentation, is that I wrote a Sloan paper last year on the topic, just trying to find some ways that we could analyze and maybe predict clutch play. So, two basic questions. Are there things that are specifically different about the clutch versus non-clutch play? I think almost everyone would agree, and the data certainly agrees, yes. Can we use this information to help make better predictions? Probably. The degree to which is definitely debated, and I don't have a good conclusion at the end of this, but hopefully that kind of sets the stage for where we're going to go. So last year for Sloan, I submitted a paper. Was not a finalist, but we were able to take player profiles in their non-clutch play and use that to predict their clutch play. So basically, what are the attributes of a player's non-clutch performance and style, and how do we use that? Can we use that to predict their clutch points per possession? And I took the advantage of this to make a silly backronym called Chauncey, who actually scored relatively well in the system. But basically, it's a machine learning model that predicts how much better you would do than baseline in the clutch. And you can see the top players all kind of have some similar attributes: Steve Nash, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Russell Westbrook. At the bottom, we have Shaq, Dwight Howard, Jermaine O'Neal, Al Jefferson. So, okay, those are definitely sticking out a little bit. Kind of the feature importance that of the random forest model used to predict this is player assists, live ball turnovers. So, self-creation, and are you the primary ball handler? Those sort of things. We could see, the estimate of unassisted field goal attempts, especially unassisted short mid-range, unassisted above the break three-pointers. Those seem to matter a lot. And then definitely the most surprising bit of the whole analysis was the feature importance for technical free throw attempts. That one was pretty interesting for me. So players that are going to take a lot more attempts in the clutch if they are the technical free throw attempter. We've seen recent examples of this with LeBron James missing a technical free throw attempt pretty badly. But players that you think of that are maybe the leader of the team, but aren't necessarily the point guard. So think like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. Those players tend to just take a lot more shots and score a lot more in the clutch. And so, yeah, obviously the inverse is true. And that's kind of what the model is showing, is that players like Klay Thompson and Shaq, Klay has had some really great clutch moments, but players that tend to score a lot off of receiving passes, and players that are bigs and players that don't shoot a lot of free throw attempts tend not to score as much in the clutch. And we'll get a little bit more into this. I think if I could do the paper again, I would talk about players on teams that are leading and players on teams that are trailing, because a lot of the difference in clutch and non-clutch, as we all know, is free throw attempts. So before we go even further, just want to make sure that when you're doing something like this, that you're making the right comparison. So we're obviously going to compare clutch to non-clutch scenarios. We're also going to do trailing versus leading in clutch scenarios, because we know that those should be very different. If your sole goal is to tie the game or extend the length of the game by fouling. So we're going to use the same players when possible. So rather than, if you only use a certain subset of teams, maybe that team was in the clutch because they're just very average and had a lot of close games. So as much as possible, we try to compare player to player in the same season. And then if you're going to use a residual or some average difference, make sure that you do the weighting appropriately. So if you've played 10 clutch possessions and 10,000 non-clutch possessions, you should probably weight more towards that low value if you're just trying to take a difference to get a weighted average for the whole NBA, for example, or if you're going to use that as a feature in your model. And real quick, just general definition. So what is clutch? So what are we going to be talking about here? So if the game's within 5 points in the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter or overtime, that's kind of NBA.com's definition. It's a little bit brittle because you can have close or not close game situations that don't necessarily fall into those buckets exactly. And so what some people have done is look at high win probability leverage situations. And again, this is really just taking Daryl's great work with leverage filters. Other people have done it for other sports and leagues. Ken Pomeroy, I think, has it in his win probability charts, for example, the leverage of the possession. But yeah, so basically just filtering by which possessions could possibly have large swings in win probability, the likelihood of having a large swing. So if you're down 5 with 1 second left, that falls into the NBA.com definition of clutch, but that's not really super low leverage, especially if you don't have the ball. The win is basically not possible to be had by the losing team. But if you're down 6 with 4 minutes left, that's actually probably a pretty high leverage situation, but or down 6 with 6 minutes left, but doesn't necessarily fall into that bucket. So by filtering to possessions that could swing win probability greatly, we can avoid the kind of arbitrary cutoffs there. So what's different in the clutch? A lot of this we already know. So it's just putting pen to paper. Got a smorgasbord of player charts for us to look at. But the first one would be that obviously in the clutch, far more are taken. So in non-clutch, excluding garbage time, so that's medium leverage on PvP stats. This is each team for the last 5 years or so. How do they shoot in non-clutch versus clutch? And you can see there's a pretty wide gap. But as we were talking about before, we expect free throws to be more taken by one of the two sides, the leading or trailing team. Obviously, we expect it to be taken more by the leading team. So here we can see clutch free throw attempts, or excuse me, not the definitions get a little fuzzy here because of the way that we can pull data. So it's not necessarily high leverage. Sometimes we're using the plus or minus 5 points. So for here, within the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter and overtime, this is the trailing team. Teams that when they're trailing, how many do they attempt? And teams that when they're leading, how many do they attempt? So you can see the leading team takes way more attempts than the trailing team. And that's because obviously trailing teams are fouling, trying to extend possession. It's basic. That's the basic science of what is easy to ascertain in the clutch, is that the leading team takes far more free throw attempts. Also, interestingly, they are made at a lower percentage. So free throw attempts in general are made at a lower percentage. I didn't do it here, but you could possibly see, okay, does it change for a leading team versus trailing team? There's been some research done, I believe it was a Sloan paper, on home versus away. So does I believe that home players actually shoot significantly worse in clutch situations. I think they had some hypotheses on it. I think my hypothesis was like, you don't want to disappoint the home team, and it's really quiet oftentimes because fans aren't screaming when you're at home. But generally we see this pattern of about players, if you take the same player in non-clutch versus clutch, they'll shoot about 2 percentage points worse in the clutch, which is definitely interesting to me. What else? So there's lots of different ways we can split this. So just looking a little more, PvP Stats has a model for shot quality. So for each shot, there's kind of an expected effective field goal percentage on it. A lot of this, his model is just from the play-by-play. So it's like a decent measure of the distance and the angle, and estimates how much time's left on the clock, or excuse me, how much time has gone on during the play. So that's kind of, I think, a proxy for the shot clock. There's a few other features there. That's on his github.io if you want to check it out. But you can see pretty drastically, change in player shot quality goes way down in the clutch. And then we'll see on the next slide how that changes for leading team versus trailing team. But, again, with all these, there's can be numerous hypotheses as to why this is. I think commonly it's said that teams take more difficult shots, especially, if the game's tied or close, because defenses are really set and their players are trying to do whatever they can. Maybe they'll give it to a player that's good at making difficult shots. Yeah, it's just a general part of clutch play. Whether or not it should be, I think, is up for debate. But definitely a big drop off in kind of expected shot quality. So a little bit more on that. We've got 3s versus 2s. So in the last 2 minutes of fourth quarter and overtime, within 5 points since the year 2001, you can see when the score is really close, there's way more 2-pointers taken. So for, on a general possession in the NBA, the odds of taking a 2-point attempt are generally higher than taking a 3-point attempt. The one spot where, very intuitively, 3-pointers are taken more than 2s is when you're down 3. So teams that are down 3 usually trying to tie in clutch scenarios, so they'll take a lot more shots. You can see lots and lots of 2s are taken when down 1, down 2 are tied. And so, again, this really just matches common knowledge, but it's something that we can ascertain from the clutch. It's information that could be possibly used to help improve predictions. So here's a little bit more on 2s versus 3s and shot quality. So you'll see the trailing team tends to take far more 3-pointers than does the leading team. And so this is the first chart here is if for each of these teams in trailing scenarios, how many 3-point attempts do they take per 100 versus when they're leading. And you can see it drops off quite a bit for when they're in the lead. Obviously, we know that if you're behind, you need more points to get ahead. So that's pretty straightforward. And obviously, if you're down 3, that the probability of taking a 3 goes up. 2-point attempts stays relatively the same, leading versus trailing. And you can see the shot quality also is about the same for leading versus trailing. So that one is pretty interesting to me that it's the same. Definitely would love to hear people's ideas as to why any of these things are the case, but this one in particular. Splitting shot quality average by 3s and 2s, I think, could help here. But again, we've got kind of infinite ways to split the data, and this is a shallow dive. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm really interested in figuring out is what are the real kind of factors here. Maybe you're taking better 3-pointers, or maybe you're taking worse 3-pointers. It could be a combination of the two, depending on if you're leading or trailing. Yeah. So here's another, probably a little more easy to make predictions with statistics. So the players that get the most minutes in non-clutch situations get even more minutes in clutch situations, and vice versa. So after around, if you play 40% of the game or more, you typically take an even greater share in the clutch. And if you play less than that, you usually take an even lower share. And you can see the little locally weighted curve there showing the kind of center and the black line, the 1-to-1. So, top minutes getters are getting significantly more minutes. Obviously, you can only play 5 players, and you're going to be selective about that. And you're probably going to select the good players who happen to play a lot more non-clutch minutes. So again, doesn't look super like a huge difference here, but I think this is a good, the rotation kind of shortening in clutch situations, kind of similar to the playoffs, I think is an interesting way that we can think about how to predict clutch play. So lots of different ways of digging into this, but can we use this to make better predictions? Well, only the tiniest bit if we're using only a few features. So one thing that I've done recently, and I've done a lot in the past, but spent a little bit of my free time recently working on this, is looking at win percentage minus your expected win percentage based on margin of victory. If you're somewhat familiar with basketball analytics, you're familiar with like Pythagorean wins, and then your actual wins. So Pythagorean wins is wins based on point differential or efficiency differential. And then that delta, the delta between your actual win percentage and your Pythagorean win percentage, that is basically, in general, how good you are at winning close games. Now, you could win close games in non-clutch situations. You could be leading the entire game, and then let's say you're up by 10, and then in the last 2 minutes, the opposing team takes 3 3-point attempts and gets really close. Something, allowing teams to come back slowly may or may not show up as that. That may or may not be something you consider clutch team play. But generally speaking, Pythagorean win percentage, win percentage minus Pythagorean win percentage represents how good you are at winning close games. And for the most part, most people have said this is random. There's not any validity to using this data. And so to test this out, I made a model that does a basically Bayesian team rating. So we've got a margin of victory model that does basically starts at 0 and then updates with each game. And it also knows whether or not the game's home or away, and then does logistic regression to predict the winner or loser. And then we use the exact same model, exact same kind of grid of hyperparameters to select. And then we add in luck, which is, we're using Bayesian luck. So this is your win percentage minus your Bayesian margin of victory. It's your Bayesian win percentage minus your Bayesian margin of victory. So basically, is there a kind of significant difference between the two? You might be thinking right off the bat, well, if the Bayesian luck differs significantly enough from 0, then that tells us, hey, there is some signal in that data. And I would agree. But the amount to which it helps the win probability model is actually quite low. Even though it does stabilize after a certain number of games, which I'll talk in just a little bit about. So here's just basically a little table where you can see that the scores are almost identical. Saying that margin of victory plus luck is better is a little bit not a genuine assertion because the numbers are so close. You can see the Breyer score is slightly better using margin of victory and luck with a 50-50 test train split, as is the log loss. But again, micro decimals here. And the same applied with the 80-20 split. No matter how I split the data, no matter how I cut it off, luck always predicted more games correctly. The model that used luck would predict more games correctly. But that number is maybe like 6 games over the course of 5 seasons. So the signal there is maybe or maybe not something that we would consider valid. But there are some other things that we could try, and I have not yet gotten around to. But some other things we could try, just using padding for your luck. So instead of doing like a Bayesian filter, doing like the padding method, which is similar, but it would enable you to use a larger sample in your predictions. And then instead of predicting the next game, so that's how the Bayesian filter works, is it updates based on each game and to predict the next game. But instead of predicting the next game, we could predict the entire rest of the season luck. So you could do basically just doing some different ways of splitting the data to get a little more signal out of it. Again, we're squeezing as much signal as we can get out and not getting a whole lot. So another thing could be using more features. So as we talked about before, the best players, or at least the players with the most minutes, tend to play quite a lot more than do others. And so one very, very, very small mystical bit of signal in the noise is that the usage minutes of your top usage minutes player seems to predict the clutch ever so slightly. So if you take the sum of your number 1 usage minutes player, that has the highest R² of being able to predict luck of any of the other groupings. So the more players you add in, the lower that predictive ability gets. So it does appear that there is some significant signal in your highest usage player. I believe some others have done something similar, like looking at inequality. So basically, if you have one player that is really good at soaking up a lot of usage, that tends to increase your ability to do well in clutch situations. The easy example is, just Kawhi Leonard. If you have a player that's really good at taking up a lot of possessions, they're usually good at making more difficult shots. There's just a slight there's definitely a correlation there. And so maybe that kind of player that is good at difficult shots could possibly improve your ability of winning in close games. But again, this R-squared is so teeny tiny. Lots of grains of salt with all this. So what else can we do? Obviously, for a lot of these analyses, we're missing significance testing. So like, what's the probability that the clutch is different than non-clutch? What is, even if you get a whole lot of data, it's still kind of hard to tell because a lot of clutch data is just not that many possessions. Some other things I've tried to do is work on what's the similarity in clutch to the playoffs, or excuse me, this is something that could be done. What's the similarity of clutch to the playoffs? And so, as we all kind of assume some of the things that apply in the clutch also apply to the playoffs. So can the playoffs help improve models that predict the clutch, or vice versa? Can models that incorporate clutch help predict things in the playoffs? That's something that's super interesting to me. So yeah, the basic outline of everything I've just said would be that there are definite differences in the ways that players and teams play in the clutch. And so that we all kind of knew that, but if you're able to split up the data in a good way, I think that there is probably some really good analysis to be done and perhaps machine learning models to help predict different kinds of play. Kind of similar to what Mike was saying, all this data lives on pvpstats.com. And so if there's people that want to go dig in more, I think this is a really good jumping off point because it's at the very least super interesting. And so you can output data on, how's your favorite player doing in the clutch? Now, whether or not that's significant, that's the statistically honest thing to do. So obviously you should do that. But yeah, that concludes my presentation.
Okay, Nathan, thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. I guess I have a question that you've been asked quite a lot, but I have to do it. And it's, if you've been working with this lately, are you finding any kind of outliers in clutch situations with this COVID season where there are no fans?
That's a great question. I decided actually to leave the current season out of a lot of my data because of this. So I was trying to make larger assumptions about the NBA in general. And so I wanted to exclude, for some of them, I included 2021, but for the most part, my assumption was that, again, because we have such small data sizes, I'm trying to use as large a sample as possible. So just looking at this season, even if I was able to discern something like that, doing significance testing or, some like true Bayesian value could be kind of tricky. So the answer is no, and someone should try it.
Thanks. I was expecting that answer as well.
Yeah.
Then I have another question that is, as you said, the concept of clutch sometimes is too wide and it includes a bunch of things. And maybe when we think about clutch, we think about the headlines like the last minute of the game and so on. And I think that in that situation, it's where the shot quality decreases, but also because there's a correlation somehow with the game clock. Like you have to hurry up to score a three. So I don't know if you think that the shot quality like drastically decreases in the last minute.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, my assumption, and people should dig into this, would be the less time you have, if you're the two best predictors of that would be lower amounts of time remaining and you're trailing. So obviously if you're in the lead, like you're just taking free throw attempts. Like it almost doesn't matter what if you're leading by enough, it doesn't really matter what your shot quality is, because your goal isn't to get good shots. Your goal is to not give the ball to your bad free throw shooter or get a turnover or something like that. So yeah, that would be my assumption, but I have not dug into it.
And I have last one, and that's just like an idea that it's like when you compare the attempted twos and threes in trailing situations when trailing by three, I think it's also interesting to check the number of 2-point free throw attempts. Because a bunch of coaches, and I include myself into this, we want to commit the foul to make them go to the free throw whatsoever. But sometimes now, even that with the instant replay and everything, it's harder to commit a foul and not commit a unsportsmanlike foul. So I don't know how this changes, but I think it's something relevant.
Yeah. So like almost, I mean, you almost kind of want to take all shots into account. So it's like your true shooting percentage, but then maybe throwing in, knowing what kind of shot it was could help affect that. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Okay, I don't know if Mike and Andrew have some questions.
I've got a question. Yeah, so something I wondered about, and I think it showed up in one of your earlier slides. Like, I think Shaq was like one that like had a much lower expected usage in the clutch. And in general, I'm just wondering, like, you don't really think about bigs as like being clutch players, and maybe some of that's because they're more valued for defense. But there's plenty of bigs that can score. And I remember I put together an analysis showing that, like in clutch situations, using my own definition since everybody's got their own, but Anthony Davis had like really strong effective field goal percentage in clutch situations, but took up a very low percentage of his team's shots. And so is there some positional bias to clutch? Like, is there a reason why bigs don't get as many clutch attempts? Is that just how basketball is played? Is that like an opportunity?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest predictors was like how many unassisted above the break shots you're taking. So I think that is just kind of correlated with, are you a reasonably decent jump shooter? And obviously it's easier to pack the paint than it is to guard the 3-point line in general. And so I think that's why a lot more attempts are taken by these kinds of players, and fewer are taken by bigs. And so again, a lot of the analysis, the rudimentary analysis was like, okay, true shooting percentage is like relatively random based on position, but or the increase or decrease is in clutch. But usage was the thing that we could kind of see across the board what was changing. And so, yeah, I think Shaq, I mean, it requires an assist, right? So I guess, man, I think I missed the slide on assists, but assists do go down in the clutch. And so basically just like teams' decision-making seems to be less focused on bigs or getting to the rim. It's like maybe too conservative because they're too concerned for a turnover, and so the ball kind of stays out. That's part of it, but yeah, for the most part, I mean, that's the one thing that I did really want to tease out is like, okay, a lot of these players are just taking a lot more free throw attempts because they have the ball. And so like, okay, your scoring is going to go up. So I think if I was to do it again, yeah, I would take those players out, or I would just look at the trailing team, because that to me is what makes clutch basketball. Clutch basketball is when you're the trailing team and you're like, what do you do? Because if you're in the lead and it's like, okay, maybe you want to extend the lead. Sure. Okay. Like you're up by 2, you get a cool play to a dunk, whatever. But for the most part, like if you're up 2, you're not the team that's like trying to take these really difficult jumpers, right? Like that's, I don't know. I'm just kind of hypothesizing here, but I feel like that isn't quite as, depending on how much you're up by, the closer or more down you are, I think the more it tends towards the like jump shooters, which tend not to be bigs. So yeah, those are kind of just hypotheses, and kind of what the data shows for player position.
No, yeah, that's really interesting on the assists. And is that a potential opportunity? Like, do teams get too conservative or too worried about a turnover when maybe that's a risk worth taking to get the most efficient shot in the clutch?
Yeah, that I think is like the real good, like the way that coaching should kind of take this analysis is not what are we doing, but what should we be doing? Because I think everyone would agree. I mean, in Ben Taylor's Thinking Basketball, he says like, I don't know why, like it's like there's this idea that you have to take this hard shot, and it's like, well, you're well coached teams, like you have this and that. It almost, I mean, it reminds me of like in professional football, going for 2 or going for a first down, which is like, if you get it wrong, it's emotionally like really bad, and like for a coach, like really bad, like the PR of it, the optics are really bad. But is it the best expected value? Maybe not. That's kind of how I view it.
Yeah. You feel better if you miss a clutch shot as opposed to like turn it over before even getting the shot off.
Right. Yeah. Or like, I feel like passing in general is just like everyone's scared of doing if you're losing in the clutch.
Nate, I like how you've succinctly described my Sixers viewing experience for the last 5 years based on how not to conduct clutch possession. So thank you for.
I didn't talk about
contextualizing it.
I was just trying to, be nice.
I was thinking about because they were actually the two of them are interesting because Embiid is the high usage guy, but he actually shoots incredibly well from the stripe and has no guards, whereas Simmons is something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, they seem like an interesting case study in roster construction. You might need to do a non-traditional clutch experience because you got no other options.
Yeah, the Ben Simmons experience, I've probably done the most like stats on his clutch play, and I think his rookie year he was like one of the best clutch, or had like one of the highest usage and efficiency trade-offs in the clutch, and maybe his first 2 seasons, and then since then it's just like absolutely cratered. I think it's like 9% currently usage. So I don't know if that's like. I don't know what's causing that. So again, sample sizes here are teeny tiny. So I think overall he's actually like above average in the clutch, but biasing towards recent, he's been below average.
Also, I'm sure on defense on clutch it actually matters too. So there's that. But yeah.
Valid.
Okay, great. Thanks for the talk once again. We may switch to the last one, that it's Andrew's.
All right. So thanks to Nate and Mike for the intros, and Adrià, we have here the how and why of communication with graphics. A lot of this kind of dovetails nicely with what Todd talked about in your previous, as Todd and I we have a pretty overlapping career trajectory and skill sets, which is funny. But broadly speaking, talking about how to use graphics to communicate and why to use graphics to communicate. This is a new slide as of very recently due to this occurring last night or the night before. A picture's worth 1,000 words. This is something we've heard before. Essentially what it means is that there's more information density in an image than you can provide in a text or a table or things like that. And like a fun working exercise here to actually understand what this means is try to describe this picture in 3 sentences and see which is more interesting to you, looking at this picture or your description of it. I'm willing to bet that the picture is more interesting and you understand it instantly without having to look at it or read it. And your best attempt to describe this picture in words would likely need a couple paragraphs to be fully fleshing out the entire visual experience. However, when we make graphics of these quantitative results for basketball or for really any kind of analytics-based approach, we go in the opposite direction. Instead of having a picture and say, oh, let's describe this, we get a description, and then we have to make an image. The description in this case isn't Anthony Edwards dunks really, really hard. It's a regression model using 2,000 lines of code and a whole bunch of databases. So how can you make an image that describes the results of that regression model based on just the description? So what we have here is the difficult part is, can you create a visual that distills a very complex topic into a single frame or image that's easily understood, quick to consume, and accurate? You can obviously fudge any of these 3 based on specific needs, but broadly speaking, I think these are kind of your big 3 tent poles when you're thinking about images to display for consumption in really any context. Next, I have some rules for graphics. Keep in mind, I have literally no formal design training, and the last art class I took was in middle school. But I've made enough of these and seen enough of these that I have some general principles that I believe are correct. This is in no particular order of these principles, but just getting to them. The first one is to know your audience. Who is going to consume your content? Are you writing a paper that's going to get published in a scientific manuscript, or are you publishing something that's going on Nylon, or are you making a graphic for Twitter? There isn't a problem with any of these. It's just the needs and kind of conventions of your audience will change. For example, on the top here is kind of a boring chart. It's very, very simple. It's mostly black and white, and it's very descriptive. It's from a government publication on toxicology and risk assessment from my real-world job. And the bottom is a very cool Twitter graphic. You can see that the bottom one is more artsy. It's more interesting to look at. It is likely not suitable for publication in a government journal due to its interesting colors and shapes and things like that. But it's really great. And again, this is a very simple and, black and white case of how to tailor your output for your audience, but the kind of thing that goes in a report to a coach versus the thing that goes on Twitter versus the thing that goes on your blog should be tailored differently, knowing who's going to read it. If you're somebody who has an enormous following of some sense, you can be safe to assume that there's all kinds of people going to consume your content. So maybe tailor what you're trying to do based on either the largest group of people to consume or the person or people you care the most about. Next on knowing your audience, don't talk down to your audience. You sound like a jerk. And talking down is essentially, it's not simplifying your material properly. It's simplifying it in an insulting way. Next, don't speak over your audience's head. This isn't accidentally using words they don't know. It's intentionally trying to big time people or not taking the time and care to sanitize your presentation or results to the audience because you just figure what you say is good enough. You still sound like a jerk, and also no one understands you. Things to keep in mind. And this is hard to run the balance between talking down and speaking over the head, and that's what good speakers and good presenters do. And again, it's tricky because if you have one chart, you can't necessarily sit there and explain to somebody. You have to just hope that on paper or on Twitter or on a website, it comes across appropriately. Titles and labels. Again, this is a graph from my real world non-basketball work. I'm crazy about titles and labels. You need to be descriptive but concise. Provide as little input, as little words, few words rather, as possible that explain what's talking about. Ideally, your chart can stand alone and someone can understand it. It doesn't mean that everyone in every industry can understand this. I'm willing to bet that not everyone knows what PM 2.5 micrograms per cubic meter is, but if you're in the space that the audience is tailored for, the y-axis here makes perfect sense. If you're going to use industry or field terms, make sure you provide units, proper formatting, etc., and make your dates pretty. Dates can be very messy and take up a lot of space, and I'm a big fan of eliminating as much information as possible, be as concise as possible. This slide should be somewhat self-explanatory. Make your fonts bigger, especially your axis labels, especially your tick marks, everything. Make it bigger so people can read it, whether it's on Twitter, on a PDF, wherever. If your graph is wrong in size because it's too big because you didn't take the time to size it correctly, whether in Python or R or wherever, and I have to zoom in, I don't like that, and I'm not going to want to consume it as an entirety. So again, make your fonts as big as possible up until the point where they look comical or insane, or they make the graph impossible to read. Big as possible, make it obvious, make it easy. You have about as we talk here, you have about 5 seconds to get your point across. So with the font size, also get to the point and reduce clutter. Stealing from Mike earlier in this, this is a great example. There's very little information on here that isn't absolutely necessary to what's going on. It's obviously a screenshot of a GIF, but the point holds. There's no fluff here. It's all content, which is what we want with graphics. There's a quote that I think it was Coco Chanel said about fashion: before you leave the house, look in the mirror and take one thing off. Same thing with graphics. If you can't absolutely justify why something has to be on there, get rid of it. This also looks nice from a design aesthetic, in my opinion, but also helps the viewer focus on what's important. If you have lots of bells and whistles going on, it can be difficult to understand what the point is, and ultimately you're trying to tell a story with a chart. Next one, pick better colors. Don't pick random colors. Don't do that. Don't use oversaturated or neons that are difficult to read. Avoid red and green in combo if possible, due to colorblind issues. Colors and picking colors are a science, so let the people who know what they're doing there do their jobs. The two resources I like are a website called Coolors, Coolors. That's by far my favorite. It's incredible. You can go there and check it out and play around on your own. And then the link on the top for the R people, that's one of my favorites for R specific guidance on color brewer, color ramps, and generally understanding how best to create custom color palettes that aren't just ggplot defaults. I also like using Viridis, which is available, I believe, in MATLAB, Python, and R. And that's nice because it's black and white and colorblind friendly. So now we're going to move on to kind of how people probably know me from some of my applications. And this first one is gravity. And here's the link there. Broadly speaking, gravity is a descriptive metric. It's not a model. It's just a fancy descriptive metric that is paired with a graphic. That's a measure of a player's offensive spatial usage and efficiency. How often do they shoot, and how well do they shoot from every single place on the court, all combined? I think gravity is best explained in this image. This is from Sixers Celtics a couple years ago. You can see that Joel in the top left has the ball, about to do a handoff with Dario Saric. And in the bottom, you have Robert Covington and JJ Redick. Those players are, and then their defenders are glued to them, absolutely stuck on them. I assume that's Smart and Rozier, it looks like. But the idea is that these players are not giving Redick and Covington any space because Redick and Covington are both efficient shooters and high usage shooters, in particular Redick, who will shoot given zero space and zero time. So this is not a situation where you can stand 10 feet off and recover. Covington and Redick have gravity here. So if Saric turns the corner, their defenders can't fly down and help into the paint because they know the guy whom they may leave is going to shoot and can shoot. This is the front page, though, of the app. I'll actually go to the app right now for ease of use here. But this is what the front page of the app looks like. Right, so when we go to our application, all my apps are Shiny apps. They are built using R, and all the code is R as well. So example, what we can do here is let's take Steph here, since he's been the talk. While our chart processes, because there's a lot of calculations going on in the back here, we can see that this is gravity is both a number-based stat, and a shape. So can you guys see the chart okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. So you can see Steph's chart here. It's 3D all over the place. Something to keep in mind is that gravity is a little different than a lot of other statistics in that, like the pulling down, the negative means more or good. It's based on the idea of if you're we got physicists here. So the first image you see in an astronomy textbook about gravity, how a planet pulls down this fabric of gravity of space. That's essentially how I viewed this. So the wells, so the bottom wells here, where it's super red and low, are where Steph pulls defenders based on his ability to shoot and shoot efficiently. Important to note, this is purely offensive data. There is no defensive data. There's no tracking data. So it's kind of a visualization of an idealized situation. You can see Steph has enormous amounts of gravity above the break, as you might expect, due to his three-point shooting prowess. And again, on the wings, it's very, very low. It's important to know, like, this is a situation where you might expect Steph to be a phenomenal wing shooter because he is a great three-point shooter, but he doesn't take many because he simply isn't over there very often because he's the one creating all the time. Where if you took Clay from a couple of years ago, this would be flipped, where he's got a ton of wing gravity as well. And Steph doesn't have much around the rim because, again, he's not finishing at the rim at an incredible rate compared to guys like Giannis or some of the other bigger players. But again, we can make these for every single player. We can zoom around. We can see what it looks like. And we can go down here and look at the table and see that per game gravity, Steph is the second most three-point, kind of 26th mid-range and 107th in the rim. And this gravity plus over here says how much more that player has than the median NBA player. And so also something fun here we can go and see is we can look at, players over the years. So at the rim per game, Zion, Giannis, Andre Drummond, DeMontis. That makes sense in terms of rim gravity. Lots of layups, lots of dunks. They shoot a lot and they make a lot. And you can see that obviously for guys like Zion and Giannis and Andre Drummond, their threes per game are pretty low because they don't take and make too many of those. And a fun one to look at here is Marcus Aldridge. We can see how his career changes over time. He's been one of the best mid-range scorers in the league forever. But you can see that since 2018-19, he's increased his three-point shooting, which has really helped him remain an efficient player. Or you can see a guy like, I spelled his name wrong. I always spell that wrong. Aaron Baines, you can see he had a phenomenal year last year shooting the ball from three, and this year he's quite a bit worse in terms of gravity, which is kind of an issue on the team that got him for that reason. That's a quick overview of gravity and how it works. And the important thing is that, again, this is not a highly analytical, It's not a highly analytical product. This is essentially a very, very fancy shot chart. And shot charts in and of themselves have fairly limited utility because we don't know how they got the shot. We don't know how the shot occurred. This just essentially shows what happened and not measuring what didn't happen. But I think it's nice from a way to be able to understand usage and efficiency in the same image, as well as asymmetries in a player's usage. So now let's move on to Darko. This is not one I created. Gravity is all me, start to finish. Darko was not created by me. I essentially am the front end person for that as of now. And that's created by Kasia and K-Medved on Twitter. Nate also helped out with some of that, and some other people thanked as well. Important thing to note is Darko is a machine learning-based daily box score and talent projection system that also produces a plus-minus metric and career projections. Here's the front page, and we'll take you to the app now. But real quick, here is kind of what the outputs are. We can see that players over time, we can see how their individual DPM, which is essentially a Darko's plus-minus metric. For example, you can see Joel Embiid has increased from the beginning of his career to where he is now. And you can see that the red lines, a trend, and the blue dots are literally each single game of his career. And again, I'll note that this is not a what happened, but is a projection for every single game. It's not let's tally up how many points, how many rebounds, etc. And on the right, in the orange line, you actually see the first derivative of that smoothing trend. So we essentially you can see what direction a player's career is taking. And for a guy like Embiid at this point, you can actually see that the red line, the trend line, or the LOS, doesn't actually match up with his blue dot trajectory, which is his near MVP performance this year. That red line will likely kick up after a few more games. And next, the other cool part about Darko is that, and the visualization, is that this is a very complicated idea we're about to talk about. This is for Giannis starting from last year, saying over the next 5 years, how much value is he going to provide? It's not saying in 5 years how good will he be, but over the next 5 years, what's his average value? And the back end to get to this is hellaciously complicated, and one of the reasons that it's taking that we haven't updated it yet. But essentially, we're able to say what's the percentage that this person will provide X amount of value over the next 5 years. And for Giannis, unsurprisingly, there's a 50% chance-ish that he'll provide MVP level value from 2020 to 2025. That's not particularly surprising, but there's also some lower probability events they'll provide only all NBA or legend level status. And so we can say that over the next 5 years, we think that Giannis will play on average about an MVP level. That is a nice way to distill information that is very, very complicated to get at, and say that essentially with a bunch of model outputs, and say, here's the DPM for all these projections over this time. Just here's what we think: 50% chance he'll be an MVP caliber for the next 5 years. For another guy, Duncan Robinson, 2020 to 2025, he's projected to be about a plus 2.7 player over those 5 years. Darko loves Duncan Robinson, as do I. And you can see that he's expected to provide about of equal chance to be a good starter through all-star level value over the next 5 years. And I think that pretty much holds true. You can see there's a 0% chance of him being a legend value, which again, I think makes sense. So we'll go to the app and we can kind of explore that a bit as well. So we have a nice explainer page on this front one because, again, this is a complex idea and this is the main write-up for it. So what we can do here is we can go in to our table. Let's click on LeBron. We can see all his various trends over the years. He's played many, many seasons. You can see his career DPM more or less peaked in 29 to 2010, around, I don't know, 9.5 or so. And now he's at a paltry 7.5. You can see his various talent levels, field goal percentage and free throw percentage. And again, it's important to note that these free throw percentages and field goal percentages aren't like counting up makes and misses. It is a projection of talent, of how good you are based on a wide combination of factors. And there's some other fun stuff we can do here. You know, it's important to realize that basketball is enjoyable and fun, and so we do have some fun ones here. So let's do. So what we can do here is retrospectively compare players on their careers, not for predictive purpose, but see, we did Terry Rozier. We can see who were the players that in their careers for games 1 through 410 were the most similar in terms of their DPM. So these players provide just a way of contextualizing a player's past career, and it's fun because it kind of looks like confetti. Also heavily caveated. And then also, on a more, you can look at players based on this. You can filter by minutes. You can allegedly filter by minutes. You can add labels to things. So there's a way to explore information. I'm a big believer in letting people kind of self-serve their analytics, and this is one of the ways we do that. Last one is RAD, also one of mine. It is a regularized adjusted deterrence. It's a RAPM style model, so it's a ridge regression that exclusively models rim field goal attempts per 100 field goal attempts. So what this is doing is essentially measuring how well a player prevents rim field goal attempts. Very important to note that there are no makes. This doesn't track makes at all. It's a very simple, just did you attempt a rim field goal? 1 equals yes, 0 equals no. Here's the front page of the app, and we'll go through some of the graphics it generates. So what we have here is Patrick Beverley. He is a shooting guard or point guard, essentially. And what we can look at here in the red and blue chart is that the areas in blue are a reduction in field goal attempts when he is on court versus off court versus NBA average. And the red are areas that increase field goal attempts. So with Patrick, you can see that there are fewer attempts at the rim when he is on the court versus not. And there are more attempts on the perimeter when he is on the court. How we interpret this in the context of everything is that from smaller guards in particular, fewer attempts at the rim mean that you're not getting blown by as much. It's particularly interesting that his 5-year RAD, in this case, negative is good. Negative means you're preventing shots. So Patrick Beverley is not a very tall guy, and he is one of the highest defensive RAD profiles for his height. So you can see, understandably, that a lot of small guards are not very good at this, where he is very good. So now here we'll go. If I had any engineering skill at all, I'd make a single website like in Predictable, but alas, I do not. So we can look at a guy like Giannis, and we can see here as the server thinks. And again, like when we look at this red and blue chart on the left, what we shouldn't do is actually think that all these little blobs are super, super meaningful. Look at things in kind of a broader context. There's a lot of dark blue around the rim, and there's a lot of red right around the free throw line. And if the Bucks, if they play drop, that's what you'd expect. So some of this is going to be influenced by team coverages, but some of it is not. And if we want to look at the best ever season is Roy Hibbert at -7. He's quite good at that. Lauri Markkanen currently is what I use as the baseline for not good at this. When he's on the court, there is a massive increase in shots at the rim, and you can see this is a problem because for his height on the right here, he is the worst in the league at it. I believe, I'm not sure who's actually worse than him currently, but it's a way to contextualize how tall this person is and how bad they are or good they are at this. Generally speaking, it's most meaningful for big guys and for point guards or very small guys, because the big guys should be your rim defender ideally, and your point guards you want to avoid getting blow-bys. Other than that, I think that when we, in general, talk about graphics and ways to contextualize information, like a lot of the information is kind of tricky to describe, but I think can be inferred from the graphics with a little bit of background information, and allows people to self-serve, which is, I think, useful because being able to make essentially an infinite number of graphics versus being able to have to make one at a time to show people is a great way to let people kind of explore and learn on their own.
Thanks, Andrew. It was a really nice presentation. I think that you provided really solid points, and this must be useful for everyone. And actually, and this is just a personal situation, but I started playing a fantasy game of NBA this year, and instead of checking stats, like pure stats, I was playing with your apps. That was much more fun, but now I'm losing because I have guys like Lou Dort that he's nice, like his strat is lit, but then he's not adding the value that I was supposed to get. It was my first year playing fantasy. So that's
I apologize.
No worries. Thomas Bryant getting injured also helped not winning games. Then I guess my question here is, there should be like a communication flow. So you need to understand the metric in order to create the app. What's the process you follow with someone that creates an app, contacts you, and how is that called?
So the Darko one was pretty funny, and Nate was there for that. So it was literally, I got tired of Kostya sharing screenshots of Google Docs and making like Excel visualizations because people were asking him, hey, can you make me one for this guy? Make me one for this guy. I'm like, this is not efficient, and your screenshots are killing me. So I just said, look, I can do this in a way that originally was like for us internally, just to like use it and look at it, and then kind of spiraled into what it is now. But I think that you are correct that you have to understand what you're charting or making graphics of in order to describe it properly. There is a temptation to describe too much on the chart, and that's why I highlighted those shooting motion charts that I like so much that we shot today, because there's nothing there that isn't meaningful. And so you have to be able to understand enough about your subject matter, to understand what is meaningful and what isn't meaningful, or what is necessary and what is nice to have, and prune down from there. For some of the models and box score stats, it lends itself nicely to time series, career-based things. That's kind of what Darko's about. But or just essentially comparing players. People love to compare players, whether it's useful or not. Everyone loves comparing players. So the ability to compare players in a useful context and a slightly silly context is, I think, something that people like to do. So you should enable them to do it responsibly, essentially.
Yeah. I guess if people are buying like these NBA Top Shot moments, it's also because they want to compare stuff. So it's better if they have metrics for free, that they are cool and they express something.
Correct. Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah. I don't know if you, Nathan or Mike, you have questions.
One quick one is I just want to know what Dirk's rad is / was.
Very good, and that surprises me. And because that is such a simple model, there's obviously no prior. There's no fouls taken into account yet, because I have limitations on time, essentially, time and energy. That there are certainly guys that are anomalous, like the Wizards draft pick this year, Deni Avdija, is like the third best in the league. And while they're kind of a weird team this year, that doesn't quite make sense, but
Yeah.
the math is right. So
yeah, that's
how
interesting.
how we use that, just like there are weird outliers in RAPM, there are fewer but way weirder outliers in RAD. And a lot of that is due, I think it's harder to disentangle the lineups because there's so many Bucks players that are near the top. Like Pat Connaughton himself isn't the reason those are happening. It's because he never plays without Giannis or Brook or both.
Yeah, Ridge does not perfectly solve multicolor parity, nor does
It
it.
not.
The other thing I was going to say really quickly was that I just really, really love the career like trajectory the comparison charts in Darko, because it visualizes so perfectly yet so simply. Like, okay, the thing we're comparing is a curve, but then after that you change it to be like the future. So it's like, okay, obviously if we use the future curve, it wouldn't look as good, but also like it helps the viewer understand that the inherent uncertainty. Like you see the uncertainty because it's like a whole bunch of dots. And it's also super pretty. Yeah, that was just like I thought that was a really clever way of
like the retrospective one.
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, like the whole thing of Darko is uncertainty. Like it's hard to predict things in the future with basketball because people are involved and a little ball bounces around. So the idea that you can provide these really deterministic point estimates is not entirely true. And while having a discussion on uncertainty and variability within the context of a chart is not possible, you do that by showing kind of the spreads, and like the line here is not really, it's pretty aggressively smooth stuff, but that's how we interpret information.
Yeah, it's cool.
No, I really like the opening of your presentation and just the kind of what I found. This is, the communication challenges are not unique to sports analytics. We struggle a lot with on the actuarial side, and sometimes it's the analysis part that's really easy. It's like communicating is the hard part. So I think the principles you laid out there, I think, are really important to keep in mind. And I was just curious if there are any other kind of principles, tools, resources out there. I'm going to share what you put together with my team, but I think that's what I found is the hardest part. Is you can knock out the analysis really quickly, and then you agonize for hours. Like, how do you actually make sense of this to an audience that isn't in the weeds with you?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, especially if it's, let's say you're like all these graphs are essentially like mass produced. Like you make one for Carmelo Anthony, one for Drew Holiday, whatever. But if you're making a single chart or single graphic to tell a particular point, you have more license to kind of manually edit things as opposed to having it be one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, if you need to like annotations or the idea of what is the story that we're trying to tell with this, and can we like lead the person? In the best case scenario, a chart, if you're trying to show that this chart means thing X happened or should happen, there shouldn't be room for alternative interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say like fix the data. Like if there are multiple interpretations, then that's important to know. But if there's one thing you want to show, make it unavoidable for that to be the conclusion they draw. Mm-hmm. That is drawn from it. Use it as a way to highlight like this is the conclusion that should be made because of this. Not here's a chart. I hope you take away from it what I want you to take away from it. Like force people to, essentially, whether by annotations or good figure labels, or make it very visually interesting. I think that's really the main takeaway. Force it to tell the story you want, so there's no room for alternative interpretations, essentially.
That makes sense. There's a phrase we use in my day job. It's just, what's the so what? Like, kind of, what's the message you're trying to tell? And I think that's it too, in terms of there's probably certain design principles when you're building like these shiny apps where you don't know what player they're going to pick and like what design choices you make there, versus if you want to tell a story about Giannis and you've got the data, you're going to make different design choices to get to that point. So
yeah, I mean, the simplest one there is literally his name size. Is that because he's a player that is going to be used on every chart, you have to make sure his name fits. And so that's why the charts are like, if you have his versus Ish Smith, like if you were making a single chart for those two guys, like how you would, like your aspect ratio might differ, but you can't do that because Giannis or Luke Richard, Mbah Moute, like those names are versus Ed Davis, right? It's a very simple but very annoying one that I had to realize, that you have to fit the chart to the longest guy with the longest name. Otherwise, it's going to look, you can't have it not work. Or you can't have things cut off. That looks worse than, Ish or Ed Davis having a slightly too wide chart. That's just like a silly one. But yeah, that's one of the big design constraints.
No, yeah, I have an irrational annoyance to players with long names because it breaks a lot of the formatting on my site too. So yeah, that's the stuff it takes some time to do. So.
Just like an interesting way of, or a helpful way of doing something that Andrew prescribed of using large text is something someone recommended to me once is just decrease the size of your chart and then increase the resolution, and then you just blow it up. So you don't have to worry about if you're running out of space or getting it just the right size. It's like, no, just raise the resolution. If you lower the graphic, the text will actually be larger, depending on your software package. I'm using Python stuff, but yeah, that's one way to do that, and I found that very helpful as well.
Oh yeah, for most R users, the export graph function makes your chart so huge that when you then shrink it down to usable size, the font becomes unreadable. So that's why I recommend for graphics in R, Cairo as my exportation engine of choice. I find it to be the most flexible, seems to work better for me than GG Save. Cairo is my weapon of choice there to get things the right size, the right format. Yeah, I definitely agree, Nate.
I'm taking a note. I've wasted a lot of time wrangling with a GG Save. So
Cairo is, I can give you 4 lines of code that'll change your life.
Right.
Awesome. So I guess that's it. It was 2 hours. Okay, not as long as the other time, but still good enough. So thanks, Mike. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, Andrew. I think it was really nice, and all the topics were interesting and not overlapping at all. So I just hope that this is useful for many, not only coaches, but also fans, general managers, everyone involved, and also that you get to know them and get in touch somehow. So thanks again. Thanks for watching, and we keep in touch.